I'm Karthik Rameshkumar. I'm GitHub's Director for Field Services for Asia Pac West, so I'll save all of you the hassle of typing my name in LinkedIn. You can scan my QR code and find me. It's going to be a little bit more easier. Right through this talk, I'll try to pepper things that will make your life a little easier and find your way. When Tanai reached out to me about speaking at Accel AI Summit, one of the things that I harkened back to very fondly was my time as a founder. For me, it was about doing things that worked for me tomorrow or today evening for the hackathon and Coke Jam that I was going to do with a bunch of my friends and doing for my own startup. So what I'm going to try to do to the level best I can today is keep this talk grounded so that what you can take away from today, you can implement today in your own teams, for your own engineers, and to enhance their productivity from today. That's going to be my effort for all of you. So don't get the wrong idea from this conference talk. That's the only thing I'm asking of all of you. So why does developer productivity matter, right? It's a big question that that a lot of us ask, especially engineering managers and developers. It matters because we get to write higher quality things. It matters because we can produce more effective software. It matters because we take smarter decisions. It's also the fact that it facilitates collaboration, and it also improves developer satisfaction. These are important pieces that we need to think about when we look at developer productivity. So the problem with that, though, is that on behalf of all engineering managers in the world, the way this feels to us when you're an engineering leader and we are trying to put a pin to it is this, right? How is your developer performing has been an age-old question that a lot of us have answered by this, right? But there are frameworks that exist today, and I wish I would have known a little bit more about them when I was an engineering leader building at startup scale, so that I could have optimized my teams better. I could have gotten a lot more work done with the resources I had, right? So what are those myths that I encountered, right? A lot of times I was told, it's all about activity, commits, changes, pushes, PRs, track them all, find out how many PRs your developers are doing. Not it, right? It's only about individual performance. I've always been told that, hey, it's all about this solo developer that sits, this gray hound who knows what he's doing. Sadly, that's not true. It's not about one metric. There's no one core number that you can put on one large dashboard and say, that's my number. It never is. And it's a fair myth to also say that it's only for managers to believe, because trust me, as much as managers are looking at productivity metrics, so are all of us, because we want to be masters in our own art and craft, don't we? And it also comes down to the fact that just engineering systems, and yes, I'm saying that from the stage being at GitHub, does not guarantee you productivity gains. It's not how it works, as simple as that. So what am I going to talk about today is a simple moniker for all of you to take back and look at, right? It's a small education piece, and I'll supplement that by how something like an engineering copilot helps with these pieces today. Is a space framework. Can I have a show of hands if anybody's ever heard about the space framework or knows about the space framework here in the audience? Yes, we have a couple of champions, nice. So it goes like this. It's about satisfaction, it's about performance, activity, communication and collaboration, and then having the efficiency and flow to follow through all of this, right? I'll break it down, and you don't have to take photographs of my presentation. In the true spirit of open source, I will be sharing all of this both in my GitHub profile and my LinkedIn. So I'll save you the hassle of getting arthritis on your hands, so don't do that, right? So satisfaction and well-being comes from driving things like employee satisfaction, right? Around what they feel around them being engaged, preventing burnout, right? This is about how a team feels, how fulfilled they feel when they're doing a unit of work that they are putting out to them. That's what a developer thinks. Performance is all about pieces of metric that look at a system or a process and how well it can perform, right? It could be reliability, it could be a lack of bugs, and it has a lot of impact on code because you're also looking at things like customer satisfaction, adoption down the line, which are key, headwind metrics for you to look at in your revenue metrics as well. And obviously, another piece that comes around is activity. This is what I spoke to you about. This is the thing that we're all very, very familiar about, right, as engineers and leaders. We tend to resonate more with activity, right? It could be just the activities that you're doing. It could be coding, the hours of coding you do, the lines of code you commit, the activities in terms of PRs or commits that you're pushing out, all of these pieces too, all right? And communication and collaboration is the next piece, where it's not only about a solo team. Long gone are the days when one Mark Zuckerberg could sit out of Harvard dorm and build face mash. I think we've all come to realize that we rely on our teams as much as we rely on ourselves and our ingenuity, right? So what that entails is that a master software craftsman is someone that has the ability to actually look at the surroundings around them and find the best way to use complementing skill sets on a team, right? All of those are important. Finding documentation, finding out the ability to sort of get quality reviews of what you're doing, that spirit of collaboration is key. And with the E in the space framework is efficiency and flow, right? This is something GitHub has put a lot of literature out about. I'm sure a bunch of you read about it. Is if you're building a process, it could be a CI chain. How many handoffs do you have in that? How many people are participating in that process? What happens through of it? How many interruptions do you have? All of these pieces are key, important pieces on that. So how do I use the framework today as a key learning is take at least 3 is a good idea, and if you look at 3 metrics across these and a bunch of metrics that I've listed out, it's a great way for you to start looking at your own performance and your team's performance from today. These are metrics that are readily available for most of you in the tools that you use today, even for free, right? That's the first piece. But one important thing, and harkening back to the first slide I showed, right? Don't get the wrong idea from this conference talk. It's always going to be sized for you. You know best what works for your organization, and at your scale, it could be different. So it's okay to fail first. Make sure you try to repeat and try to find your ideal middle ground over time, right? And most important is that you have to find a way to align to what you're trying to accomplish as a company. At a startup scale, the most important thing is your mission and your values and making sure you're aligned to that. That's going to take you a long way. So, good. That's a lot of gyan. Thank you for pillowing all that. I will probably think about it and never remember it again. Fantastic way. Now, the important question that all of you are asking is, how does Copilot meet all of the stuff that you spoke about, for example? Right? I'm going to take a dive from a different angle that we've not attempted before to look at it from a space metrics angle, right? How does it really help? I don't want to preface by saying I wanted to give a bunch of live demos also for you folks, but due to technical difficulties, we've not been able to facilitate one. But you can find me outside. I've got a laptop with Copilot set up. More than glad to walk anyone that's interested in deeper use cases through a bunch of those things as well. Developers mistrust productivity tools. Yes, I'm going to make that statement out loud. And I'm sure every single developer in this audience resonates with me on this, right? We feel like someone's taking a peek behind our shoulders. We feel like, hey, this is yet another thing for me, and it induces anxiety for me. It feels like it's actually not a fair representation of my work, and this is what all developers feel whenever any productivity tool is brought in front of them, right? But what I want to talk to you about is that with the wave of engineering copilots that we have, and taking GitHub Copilot as an example, that is no longer the case because you're going to have an artificial intelligent pair programmer sitting right next to you, something that you wanted to have as a developer to make you better at how you code, but now it's actually reality because LLMs have made it so, right? So, yes, talk is cheap. So, in the spirit of true showing, I'll try to show you folks some examples, right? Unit tests are legendary in the startup world. We all love them when we tell our managers. We all hate them when we actually have to write them, right? So the fact of the matter is, LLMs are actually a great idea for starting on unit tests, because if you look at the foundational principles of how LLMs are created, they have the foundational logic of the context that goes in, the ability to fine-tune for it to be able to write unit tests on what you want to write, right? Here's an example of a very complicated unit test. I'm just kidding. It's a very simple unit test. You can see that all it takes, for example, with an engineering copilot is for you to select a bunch of code and basically ask it to say, hey, write a unit test for this use case for me. And you'll see GitHub Copilot basically generating a unit test for you for this use case. Remember that just like you're able to talk to ChatGPT, you have the ability to then fine-tune what you're trying to tell it. You can set boundary conditions. You can say, hey, I wanted this, I wanted that. You can ask it to check for other areas. You can give it examples and variables. The possibilities for developers is infinite. And at least about a 5 to 10 minutes we would have spent on writing a function like this as a developer. And this is sort of the immediate impact of what you can save, right? Right through with a simple use case of something that we're doing on a daily basis, right? Commit messages, right? This is a very passionate topic of mine, primarily because at GitHub, one of the things that we actually have is a metric where we're basically tracking how people are writing PRs. And our statistic indicates that over 40% of all pull requests on our platform have under 4 words. Brevity is the soul of wit, aren't you? Right? So here in this case, you'll see a typical PR. Some changes, right? Very, very descriptive, very beautifully written. You'll see that I'm showing you proof that here in this case, there's a bunch of Python files that we've changed, some utils. We've actually written a couple of unit tests for this as well. This is actually an example of about 4 commits across 4 different files, for example, right? And what we wanted to do was create a better experience for people that are applying for reviews and the senior engineers that are doing reviews. So we built a summary button within Copilot for pull requests, right, to enhance your workflow. So an ideal pull request, according to our Good Day project, should contain 4 key components. It should have a summary. It should have the ability for it to link back to differences. It should have descriptions of each of those differences, and it should be well formatted so it's readable. Bada bing, bada boom, right? So with GitHub Copilot, for example, as an engineering copilot, you're able to create all of these pieces in there. Gone are the days of some changes, so we'll delete that piece. And once you submit it as an ice cream on top of the ice cream cake, you'll basically see that it creates the entire thing in markdown format. So that any senior engineer that reviews it has a clear idea of what went on in that PR, and they have the ability to then pass insightful commentary on the work that you did. It saves both you as an engineer, as well as a reviewer, as well as an engineering leader, for example, right? To give you better visibility into things that are going. You still stay lazy, but we're just making you better at it, right? That's how it goes. So let's go one step further from that, right? From this markdown example of Copilot for pull requests, right? One thing that engineers do a lot of, especially in startup scale, is prototyping, right? Rapid prototyping, trying to build new things, because that's how we survive. Pivoting is as important to the startup ecosystem as is breakfast, right? So for us to be able to create new POCs and new pivots, it's important that we're able to just change things and see what happens, right? And one of the things that we realized very early on when we were doing a bunch of our research is that the majority of the time a developer spends today is in creating environments for them to test and create and build, right? Test a POC, test a hypothesis and things like that. So we built a tool called GitHub Copilot Workspaces, right? Which basically helps you create an end-to-end ability to pass a prompt and create an entire project from scratch with just natural language. So basically in this example, you will see that we're basically saying scaffold a new .NET 7 console app, should be able to generate for, this example is because we're again doing this for a speaker and an event, right? So you've got speakers and it's an event and a bunch of those things. It should use a particular library. You can define as much as your bounds will want you to do, right? So here, description is basically your true friend. And you'll see that once it's done, it actually proposed a common structure, right? So you can then tell me, okay, that's not great. I can create a couple of files. It's very easy for me to create a file structure. It's not too complex. But the fact of the matter is, GitHub Copilot does not just create that for you. With the power that LLMs bestow us, what we've created is a way for us to parcel the prompt that you wrote and build a basic scaffolding for the app for you, right? So if you see, while GitHub Copilot is generating, and I've not fastened any of this up because I want you folks to realize in true time what happens, is that GitHub Copilot right now is actually using its intelligence for all of the files that you've got here. It's trying to create individual content in terms of code, deployment files, and structures for each of those files, and opens it up for you to be able to use inside your IDE, right? You'll see that it's now available to use, and if you open up a single file, for example, the project file, right? You'll see that it actually has content in it. It's not just the scaffolding that was built for you, right? So it's a very meaningful savings of at least chai time, about 15, 20 minutes for all of you, so that you no longer can give that excuse, for example, right? Turning coffee into code is something that we all do, right? As developers, I don't know how, I know the latest generation of developers has become a lot more healthier, but at least in my generation, when I was a developer, caffeine was our currency, right? The ability to buy someone a hot filter coffee meant whether or not your pull request got merged, right? That was the time that I was a developer. But what we realized is that we want to give you the ability to do that at the time of getting a coffee, for example, right? Developers are faced today with an ever-increasing set of errors and problems and issues that come up. So in the same project that we generated, for example, there's an error that comes up, right? You can see that there's an item group start tag, yada yada, and then it tells that there's an error, right? All of you know that you've been using ChatGPT in the past to put an error in a file and then try to find out. What we've built is the same experience for you within an IDE. Remember, I spoke about flow states, right? So this is about building that customer experience for your users to use. And you see there's an example is that you can copy paste that and say, hey, this is the error message I want you to fix. And you'll see that GitHub Copilot is basically able to generate, hey, what happened, what are the next steps for this, and how do you go about fixing it, right? And then with one click, you are actually able to integrate whatever recommendations it gave and use that to make your app actually start running IRL, right? The last thing that was a bane for me as an early system administrator was regex or regex, however you say it. I think the debate is still out. It's very difficult to understand how to write system commands because we still haven't perfected it. We still have certification exams in an age where people have the ability to look up things, right? That should no longer be the case. Because with an artificial intelligent LLM, which is able to do a lot of things in the IDE, we felt that we need to take a step further. This is how we listen to customers. Our customers told us, for example, that, hey, why don't you bring it to the CLI? Why don't you bring it to command line, right? And you'll see with command line GitHub, we basically created a natural language interface for people to be able to interact with their own environments, listening to customer feedback, leveraging the latest power of technology, and at the end of the day, accelerating developers to be able to write faster because you can write shell scripts. In this weird example, you'll see that I've actually asked it for a list of all MP4 files. It actually gave me the right command. And I'm going to make it even more difficult because I'm going to basically tell it, hey, look at a list of subfolders in the current location, extract the audio track, export it into a separate MP4 file, and we're going to actually make it so complex that it's actually a mini shell script of sorts. And what you'll see is that at the end of the day, GitHub Copilot will still be able to generate even for use cases that are complicated like this, right? So you see here, it says it's asking GitHub Copilot, and then it gives you the entire command for something like that, right? It's a very complicated NLP use case for something like that. So another thing that developers are really famous for, right, and we have gotten international clout for this thing, right, is that if someone tells you something about something new, our first and default response is, I know, yes, right? So we felt that that's a superpower that you should already have, right? As developers, when you are able to actually interact with code in your repositories or organization's repositories, it's very difficult for you to find meaningful pieces of snippets for you to understand. So how we've built that experience for developers is basically by building an ability for you to have an LLM-like chat within the user interface of github.com, right? Which is our own code repository. So here, if you look at it, I'm going to ask it a simple question of, how would I shorten a URL, right? In a very generic sense. And remember here that I'm just asking it a vanilla question. So it's basically going to give me the same response as a GPT-4 probably would, right? It's going to give you something like bit.ly, use a URL shortener, and you're off to the races, right? But that's not relevant because in the age of marketing today, there's a lot of things because we've all already built frameworks and libraries for URL shortening, right? For ability to pass marketing context. So here I've integrated our own The Hub, which has a bunch of that content around marketing short links. And I'm asking the same question and say, how do I shorten the URL? And you'll see that this time around, it's actually able to give me a contextual answer that is grounded in the real truth of the code that exists in my repository. Just the inference and the reference of it. And it actually doesn't hallucinate because it actually tries to take you to the reference of where it is. Confidence is set very low for this one, for example, right? On how the use case works. So where does all this come from, right? How does GitHub build things like this, and where is your research coming from? The fact is we've been having this open source and able for people to look at since 2021. We called it the Good Day Project. It's still available. There's a short URL to this. You can go take a look at it. We realize that there are core problems that developers of today face, and we realize that that's a fantastic opportunity for us to go out and solve, just like you're solving problems for your customers in real life today, right? So the last question around satisfaction, and I've not touched that yet, is I've shown you a bunch of real-life examples, and as a developer or an engineering leader, you're able to comprehend how this can be a real-life value add to your organization, right? Now, in the intent of sort of helping you, we also did a large-scale survey with the same metrics that I spoke to you about. Remember? Space metrics. I hope all of you have not zoned out yet, right? To sort of understand how people felt about it. And this is another example of how a large mass of individuals, right? In this case, it's developers, actually interact with a survey about how they feel on using an LLM-powered tool, right? So you can go check out this as well. So these are the numbers that we saw, right? Over 70% of the people felt that they felt more, focused in the work that they were doing. About more than 60% felt that they were more fulfilled with their jobs. About 60% felt that they were less frustrated with sort of being able to code. These are metrics that you can measure today in your own dev workforces as a sample space, for example, right, for satisfaction. When it comes to performance, when you ask the same field questions, right, though you've already seen the how, when you ask the field questions, you get the same sort of responses around people saying the overwhelming majority of 90% say they get faster completions, and with all repetitive tasks, they feel like they've gotten a lot better, right? And for communication and collaborations, the ability to learn from suggestions is a key part of the ethos behind Copilot. All of the suggestions that we give are not only relevant to you, but also give you a bit of education, for example. Right? That's something that we've improved on. So that's something that we felt users really loved, and that's an important insight for all of us. And with efficiency and flow, right, people feel they're more in the flow, they find less time searching, and they find less of a mental effort on doing repetitive tasks, and these are important pieces. So for all levels of organization, we see that this is a definite use case that people are starting to use. I've given you insights into how a productivity framework works, and I'm leaving you with some verbatims, right? One of the most interesting things on that slide is how actually one of those senior engineers we interviewed spoke about how it feels like a Stack Overflow. I think that's how a lot of your users today, for example, are going to feel for their own use cases, right? When you're building an LLM-powered app, giving that ability for them to replace something that's very natural for them to look at is sort of the crowning moment of how you will succeed. So that was a little bit from me. I know we've got about 8.5 minutes left, and I'm more than glad to take questions because what I've realized is in Copilot talks, questions are like 70% of the job. So yes.
Do raise your hands if you have any questions. We'll have the mic handed over to you and you can proceed with your questions or queries.
I think I just did a stellar, oh.
Sorry, so what, is this an in-house LLM or are you using GPT-4 for this?
So yes, GitHub Copilot is powered by GPT-4 as well as GPT 3.5 Turbo. We've got multiple experiments running on multiple other LLMs as well. And that's another key lesson that we've learned as well at GitHub is that it's very important to experiment at enterprise scale, even if you're small. Like if you look at GitHub, though we've been in this industry for over 15 years, this was a nascent baby for us. We're new to the AI game. We've never been in the AI game, right? So for us, we're as good as a startup, and it's a small bandy team of 30 people that's actually working on this. Our biggest lesson has been iterate. We've tried a bunch of different models, and we've seen differing results, and we've just iterated and kept moving on. So if you look at our changelog and our product releases, you'll see that we've found a use case, we've hammered into that use case, and then accelerated and moved on to next. That's been very useful for us.
Hi, my name is Vasan. I work for AgroStar. And my question is that in our company, we do a lot of code changes, not new code writing, right? So we have to inspect the existing code and make small changes here and there. How useful is Copilot in these cases?
It's the same way, right? So the same way you can actually take an existing, like if you've seen the demo for Microsoft Word Copilot as an example, right? You'll see that it actually takes existing content or existing Excel sheets, for example, and is able to then change based on the context you give it. In the unit test example also, right? It's existing code that is able to create a new functionality on. You can still be able to select a bunch of code and say, hey, this does this, but I want it to do this. And we've seen very strong success if you just write your business logic, and that's the LLM funder, right? There's so much code available in this word, I think trillions of lines of code, that if an LLM gets something right, there's a really high probability that it's code, right? So that's sort of where we come from. So yes, it works with existing code. You've just got to select that existing piece of code and ask clearly, intentionally, and with sort of clarity on what you want it to do, and it'll give you the output for that. And with one click, you can integrate it into an ID of your choice and be on. So it works with existing code, new code, doesn't really matter.
Does it understand YAML?
Yes, absolutely. GitHub uses YAML natively. So we built it because one of our products called GitHub Actions, which is CI/CD, actually understands YAML. And if you go to my profile, you'll actually see that I've stopped using an ID for writing all of my automations on CI/CD. All of my YAML is now written by GitHub. I basically declare intent, and then it goes about what it's doing. I just have to change the secrets, that's it.
Hi, this is Vivek. So we do use Copilot, but for it's our main editor ID is actually PyCharm. So for all these purposes, the demos which you are showing, all these things, are very well integrated with Visual Studio. Unfortunately, same amount of interactions are not available on other IDs. Is there any roadmap for getting it up and running for similar IDs? Like
We've heard that feedback. So if you've listened to GitHub Universe, which is our largest sort of event we've done, where Satya actually came as a guest speaker, we were all surprised. We actually did the same announcement where we're basically going with a public beta of IntelliJ, all of the family of IntelliJ IDEs with the same chat feature. Copilot exists today as a code suggestion in IntelliJ, but it's coming forward as a chat interface in IntelliJ.
Yeah, I actually got that update day before yesterday. Unfortunately, we have to enable it at org level,
yes,
I believe. So.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Thanks.
It's a beta.
After this question.
I think I'll come right to you. Yes,
Prashant from Encrypt. So what level of red teaming has been done before the Copilot was released? Just in all fairness, like how sensitive data or code gets released, right?
Right. So there's two frameworks at play here. One is GitHub is a Microsoft company, as you can already see with the Microsoft pin I'm wearing. And Microsoft has a zero trust environment for LLMs. It's always pioneered that as much as we can. So on the LLM front, a lot of red teaming has already been done by Microsoft for us. We run on Azure OpenAI LLMs. That's where we run most of our production workloads. So a lot of the red teaming has been done in conjunction with us in research already by the pieces are there. For our product in itself, we've actually got a 20-member red team that has been doing red team testing for all of our GitHub products. GitHub actually serves over 100 million developers. We're one of the world's largest SaaS platforms. We have over 100 million developers, and we give away our core product for free, right? So if you look at the list of DDoS sites in the world, GitHub is ranked 3, right after Google, right, and Bing.com. So we know a little bit about how people do abuse. And over years, I think we've gained expertise on just toning that down and finding it. Even in our LLMs, we've got filters, which you can actually read about in our blogs, where you'll see we actually don't store data anywhere in Copilot. We don't train our models with any of it. That's how we give you like a pristine experience as a business customer, right, without taking your data outside. So there's a bunch of stuff that we've pioneered, and a lot of the people are actually learning from us and doing the same thing. We're super proud to see that that's happening and that ecosystem is growing along with us. There was a question up front. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, hi. My question was around the user experience for Copilot. So I currently use a AI first IDE cursor, and I was wondering if you have thought about like how does an IDE that is built from the ground up to use AI compares to like a plugin for VS Code for Copilot?
Right. So if you look at GitHub, our focus for Copilot was largely to look at the overwhelming market share of IDEs. So if you look at our release map, you'll basically see a very clear map. Whatever Stack Overflow survey of IDE use basically says, you'll see that GitHub has been releasing plugins for those IDEs because our intent is to get to as many developers as we can to democratize this for them, right? Yes, there are many other IDEs that we would love to support, but I think the way we would do that over time would be to expose APIs. That's a work in progress for us. So just like you'll have OpenAI API services, you will have Copilot API services so that those will be specifically tuned to code use cases, right, for developers. So an IDE provider, for example, could then use these APIs to then leverage those abilities in their own IDEs. That's the way we're looking at it. Because we understand that we can't solve the IDE problem in the world because it's like where we were with web browsers in the 1999. So I think that something's got to change there. There's one in the front, and then we can.
Yeah, slightly different. You might have heard that Wolfram, Stephen Wolfram, he wanted to integrate Mathematica with ChatGPT, a GPT, so that GPT can start programming, coding in all mathematical problems, and it can be used for scientific application. I mean, you are in Microsoft, right?
Yes.
If you know anything about it, can you tell us?
I think this is Wolfram's vision in reality, if any, right? So I think in the technology world, the one thing that happens is we all take inspiration from a lot of others. I mean, who isn't inspired by Jobs' work on the iPhone, right? So I think in the spirit of true community, we've all taken ideas from each other and grown better, right? The same way I'm here to share ideas with all of you so that what I've learned, you can take it forward and build for your customers. I think that's the same spirit. So Wolfram would be happy, I guess. So it works on everything the same way. It works on Python, it works on NumPy, it works on all of those things that Wolfram would have loved to sort of use. So I think he'd be happy.
No, he said he'll integrate GPT.
Yeah.
You need to know the project.
We can't disclose any details about that.